Chairman. Thanks to the Minister and his officials for coming in. Minister, you talk about 7 million in relation to forestry. Last week at this committee, Teagasc were in here to give us a fairly sobered assessment that because the first 5 years of trees being planted is basically dam all and sequestration, and we're in bother between now and 2030 because basically from 2016, you weren't there, I'm not saying anything to you, but we have failed to plant basically for a few years 50% of what we're projecting, and look at 75% for the rest few years. And they made a damning statement here that would frighten the daylights out of anybody when they said that nearly you'd want to hold up the cutting of trees towards the end of this decade, the way that, because we'll be actually cutting an awful lot more than we're planting. What responsibility does the people in the department take for that, for what has gone on? And is there any such thing as accountability? Because if from 2016 we are pushing farmers now, and the job that you have at hand, and indeed your officials, with the climate bill and all of that, of trying to basically offset one thing against the other to make sure that we're in tune. Isn't it frightening that it's not the farmer's fault, and it's probably not any minister's fault, but this has been let linger on? And I know what you've said, and everyone supported the bill in relation to the last year and cutting the trees, the licenses for felling, but we are still, have a look at the dashboard, we are still stragglers when it comes to giving out the forestation licence. I was looking even yesterday at them. And while the figures, they said that we'll do, is it 4,000 licenses or whatever in the year, hectares, whatever they want to talk about, the figures, that'll be the headline. But the facts are, Quilcha is getting a good shot to them at the moment, and I'm not saying they don't need them. They'll have their EISs done and all that crack, and it'll be zooming them through fairly quick. But at the side of it that we do need licenses, we are struggling. Is it concerning for you? And like, I know there has been a new appointment lately, but can you leave the same people playing the same tune when over a 6-year period this is going to cost the farmers and indeed our country down the line, if we're to believe what we heard from Teagasc, being honest with you?
Well, there's no doubt, Deputy Fitzmaurice, there's a real challenge there that if you in the first number of years after you plant trees, the take-up and the carbon sequestration is low because they're so small. 5 years. Yeah, and it does take time, and it does gather pace then as the years go on. And that's why, in terms of the Climate Action Plan, we have looked, for example, at the balancing out of the sequestration potential between this decade and the next decade, so that plantations that happen this decade, that there can be credit for that based on what it will average out at over the 20s and the 30s. And I think that's important because it further incentivises that drive to actually a forest now from the point of view of delivering in terms of our targets. And you're right, even this year the afforestation is not replacing the felling, and that's not a sustainable situation. Listen, you know the backdrop in relation to the change. The licensing had been operating in a timely fashion, and then as a result of legal decisions and court decisions, that significantly radically changed it and led to the very significant backlog, and also the very significant increase in staffing and resources that we put in place to try and address that. The amount of time involved in any one application now is a multiple of what it would have been previously, and that's something which meant that farmers weren't getting the service that they deserve or that they should be getting in relation to the licensing. It's something that we've massively tried to address. It is going in the right direction now and improving, not as quickly as we would have liked, but we're getting there bit by bit and continuing to drive it. And you're right in relation to afforestation, that has lagged behind. We have in recent times put 10 ecologists specifically on the afforestation piece to try and drive that on, because that is a weak spot and that is something we want to see addressed.
Okay. I want to be fairly brief because other people, I think, wants to talk. In relation to glass beef genomics, TAMS beam scheme, what monies is left over in total from that? 'Cause I don't have and where will those monies go?
I'd ask Rebecca, maybe if you, do you have those points?
So you have glass beef genomics,
Rebecca?
there's less farmers in it, forestry, TAMS and beam.
Yeah.
Where's all that,
So
how
David,
much?
with regard to a lot of the 2021 payments, of the vast majority issue in the last quarter of the year, so we won't be able to know accurate figures until the end of the year, and obviously they'll be published in the appropriation account, but it's something we monitor very closely, and every effort has been made to maximise payments under all.
Does that money go back to the Exchequer or is it held in the Department of Agriculture?
Anything that is unspent at the end of the year on the current side is returned to the Exchequer. But when they're EU-funded schemes, we are in multi-annual commitments on the EU funds. So for they would roll over in multi-annual commitments.
Okay. Minister, going back to CBI, there was a report done out, I saw something on AgriLend or one of them things, that Macra had talked about for young farmers, that there was some sort of a scheme coming out for, or agreed in the EU. Now, I didn't see it myself, I've looked, but just, is there something coming out for young farmers to be able to get access to money easier or handier for buying land, or there was a report done, I saw Macra writing something. Can you elaborate on that, or are you aware of anything on that?
Listen, just to deal with your previous point, which Rebecca was answering there, obviously, in terms of where there is underspends in certain schemes, it makes this task of doing revised estimates important, because we try and profile it as much as we can within the year to reallocate and to manage that. In relation to the, obviously, we are looking at different options that can support from a reduced, or from a financing and reduced interest rate point of view. Do we have anything specific on that, Rebecca? Do we?
And I'll give you another question while you're looking for that, Rebecca, if you want. In relation to, say, monies left over or whatever, why don't we look at ideas like starting up, say, grants for solar to farmers under TAMS, say, where you are held up, and I understand fully with the situation between COVID and the lack of builders in places, are systems, I know the systems at play at the moment for reducing methane and all of that in tanks, are you actively looking at them things to put them in?
In terms of solar energy?
Solar and the systems out there. I know the Taoiseach was in Ballinasloe looking at a new idea with Easy Fix in the line for reducing methane in the slurry in the tanks. Are you looking at innovative ideas like that, that if you had money left over, that it might be a quick win and a quick hit?
Yeah, listen, I was an Easy Fix myself as well, and a really innovative company that are really looking at, you know, bringing technology and research to bear in relation to housing materials and how they can be most effectively used. So, listen, we are obviously, as you know, in the recent budget, I increased the TAMS allocation for next year for the solar energy to 60%. Really important piece, and that is going to be, though, the feed-in tariff and getting that in place, which we expect to have in place from the start early on next year, and I think that will see a significant drive in relation to solar energy. And listen, then in terms of moving forward with our climate action plan and the targets, we are looking at all different options which could contribute to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And two shorter questions. In relation to the veterinary medicine regulation, we are hearing at the moment that there is meetings taking place in certain places around the country where vets are telling farmers at these meetings that basically, if you're getting your dose and stuff for the cattle, you'll be getting a sample of their dung, to put it simple, and that this, what we understood here at committee, and I'm flagging this to you, Minister, what we understood that at a herd test, you could get your doses for fluke or liver and do your plan out with the vet But that doesn't seem to be adding up at the moment to what we're hearing on the ground. And I'm flagging it to you now that if a problem comes up, that a vet is going to be coming out every time looking at a lock of cattle for basically to see or write a prescription. No farmer could afford it. And I would ask you, Minister, before anything is done on this, to have it definitely workable for farmers. Don't leave it in a situation where they're caught with one person. And on top of that, for farmers, and even say for the dairy sector at the moment in January, February, March, when there'll be calving, a lot of cows will be calving, they'll need injections for calves with scour and all the different problems that arise. You can't be just going down for a little, sort of the size of the biro for one calf and then going down the next day and the next day. It needs to be put into perspective that farmers they don't just throw an injection something for the crack, and they need to be able to be covered that way. So I'd ask you, Minister, to make sure and go through that before anything is signed off. And the last thing, I just can't get my head around, and look, you know this better than I know it from your own area. In organic, I was talking to farmers in a few hills in Galway and Mayo in the last few days, and their lamb, in my opinion, is organic. Only the problem is because they're in a commonage and someone else might have sheep in it, and there's a stocking unit where some of them had to destock because of the Department of so the NPWS, because of designation, they had to destock. That they cannot go into organic, even though they're, as the minister says, they're nearly like brother and sister to organic, that type of way, they're so close to it. Is there any bit of sort of common sense could be brought in that way for farmers, the way that, first of all, to get our organic figures up, but second of all, to help them a lot in their situation? And that's all I have to, thanks for your time as well, Minister, and I do support you on the cap that you've brought out. I want to be clear on that as well.
Thanks very much, Deputy Fitzmaurice, and I appreciate that and your comments in relation to the cap as well. In relation to the veterinary prescribing and making sure we get that right, I think it is a difficult issue and challenge, but it is one we have to get right and ensure that there's common sense in the midst of it. We can't continue the situation where everybody is the leading expert on medicines and anthelmintics in their own world, because it is not as straightforward as that, and we do need to ensure that the most appropriate research and science is part of the equation, and advice is in there, because we have had real challenges and something that's not sustainable in terms of that growing resistance, which will leave us all in a very bad place in a number of years if we don't be very responsible in terms of the attitudes we take to it. So it's about trying to put in place a system that is robust from an avoiding resistance point of view, with a situation and a process and practical application that works for farmers, from a cost point of view, and also from that point that you just pointed out there in relation to the on-farm implementation of it. So that's the balance we're trying to get. We're trying to get right. There has been lots of meetings and engagements on it, and we will be hoping to bring it to a conclusion soon in preparation for that change over next year. The point then you made,
organic.
The organics. Thanks. Yeah. So listen, we have very significant ambition there on organics in the next cap. It's a big lift up and step up, but it is one that we're going to be considering the schemes that are in place in relation to ensuring that they do support that. I take the point you're making in relation to hill lamb in particular, and so that's something that we will reflect on in advance of the next cap and of those schemes coming into play.
And the last point I have, Minister, thanks for your time, is it's just one I'm giving out or saying to you there. In the line of the eco scheme, we do need a few more choices. I would be the first to say that. And I know that you're looking at that, and I'd welcome to make it workable for all farmers, but it is needed as well. And that's all I have to say. Thanks very much.
Accept that, Deputy, and that is, I agree. That's something we hope to bring proposals forward on.